Hello everyone. Once again, thank you all for being so positive. A lot of you either commented on the last video or messaged me on Discord saying you wanted a follow-up video talking about the trading sequence mentioned towards the end of the last video. And I have to say, after talking to some of you about it and the new details, you all have me more curious than ever. Timestamps should be on screen. If you all like, I will try my best to add these to all of our videos and podcasts. So comment below and let me know, not just about the timestamps, but this overall video and your general hopes or wishes for Breath of the Wild 2, and we can discuss it all in the comments. We will begin with a quick recap of all of the details, rumors, and history. Then cover the new details, ending with my personal thoughts, going over what some of you had to say about it, and some comparisons. You can watch our last video to catch up on everything in more detail, but it was mostly talking about details on Ocarina of Time and GameCube games on Switch, changes made to Breath of the Wild 2's English script to be closer to the Japanese script, new scenes and dialogue being added, more bilingual upper management or supervisors being brought in to have better translations closer to the original source, and to speed up the overall localization process. He mentioned some items that would be important to the game, a timeline of the work taking place behind the scenes, and a small connection with Hyrule Warriors: Age of Clams. To correct a few comments I seen on the last video, yes, we have had people that worked as writers for Nintendo as guests on this channel before. However, none of them are this person. This was all sent to us by someone who I trust based on a lot of things they told us that ended up being true, and their debunking of other popular rumors and leaks that ended up not happening, such as the rumors of Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD coming to Switch this year, or being announced at E3, Breath of the Wild mostly taking place below Hyrule. He corrected some misinformation about the localization process at Nintendo, which we were told by someone else who also claimed to work for Nintendo, and it could just be coincidence. But oddly enough, he happened to first reach out around the same time we were asked by Nintendo to be part of a Zelda event. But again, could have just been coincidence. I ended the last video mentioning something he said about trading in Breath of the Wild 2. On a lot of the stuff, he will usually say what he is comfortable with us discussing and what he isn't. And he left it a bit vague on this, which is why I didn't include it in the last video. So I wanted to wait until he gave a definite yes or no. Plus, I had my own questions I wanted to ask, and it took a few days to get a reply. He corrected me on a misunderstanding or mix-up I had. In the last video, I called it a trading sequence. He made it clear that was not what he was referring to, although the game will also feature side quests based around trading sequences or fetch quests. What he was referring to was a brand new feature which would allow trading, selling, and purchasing of certain items with NPCs and other players. Yes, you could already buy and sell stuff to NPCs, but you couldn't trade, so that is new. And anything having to do with other players in general is kind of crazy. After talking to some of you about all of this, it just has me wanting to ask even more questions. Trading or buying from other players implies online multiplayer of some sort. Is it a full online multiplayer, or something more like Miiverse in Wind Waker HD, where the online multiplayer was just simply throwing a message in a bottle into the sea and wondering if any of your friends will ever even find it? I know multiplayer of any type in a Zelda game is really polarizing for the Zelda community. Half of the fanbase thinks it should just stay single player, and adding in multiplayer would completely ruin the game, usually giving Four Swords Adventures or Triforce Heroes as an example. The other half of fans love the idea of running around Hyrule, solving puzzles, fighting bosses, and doing everything else with their friends alongside them. How I view it is, I don't really understand why people would hate the idea of multiplayer. Yes, forced multiplayer would 100% ruin the experience for single players. However, why does it need to be forced multiplayer? It could be 100% completely optional. An example I always use when asked about multiplayer in Breath of the Wild or other Zelda games is Wolf Link in Breath of the Wild. A lot of you may know the first thing Aonuma ever said about Zelda Wii U, as it was known at the time. was that the game would break the traditional Zelda formula, and he did not want players to think of it as a single player experience. For whatever reason, obviously, it ended up being 100% a single player experience. However, I think WolfLink was some sort of compromise. Maybe that isn't the right word to use, but think of it like this. WolfLink is essentially a second player. He is just controlled by the CPU, and not an actual player. For those who don't know, both Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, which most people think of as only single player games, actually had really fun and optional multiplayer modes. This wasn't multiplayer forced into the main story. They were completely separate modes that did nothing except add more content or overall fun to the game. But I think we can all agree multiplayer wasn't the problem with those games. A lot of people had trouble with the touchscreen only experience. Also, pointed out by someone in our Discord, Phantom Hourglass had its own online trading feature, similar to the chest idea I'll get into in a moment, where you could trade ship parts or sell items. After talking to some of you about this, and being reminded of this feature, I tried thinking of ways that it could possibly apply to Breath of the Wild 2. Now, imagine if the plans Aonuma wanted for Breath of the Wild actually happened, and it wasn't a fully single-player game. Instead of a CPU controlling WolfLink, what if your friend, whether they are local, on the same console, or online, could pick up their controller and send you a request to join your game and then appear beside you as WolfLink? Obviously, being able to play as your own version of Link from your game and save file, or even another race like one of the champions, would be even better. But either way, this type of multiplayer in no way does anything to ruin the single player game. Not a single bad or negative thing comes from this. It only adds value and benefits to the game. It being 100% optional, just as WolfLink already is, means those against multiplayer can just play through the entire game without even giving it a thought, while those who do want it would finally get the multiplayer Zelda they've been wanting. A large percentage of players, especially newer fans, aren't even aware WolfLink can even be summoned into the game. Not a single puzzle, quest, boss, shrine, enemy, or anything is changed. Another way to add a type of multiplayer would be to release DLC that would allow for multiplayer, and Nintendo could change certain puzzles so that when played in multiplayer mode, would take advantage of or require multiple players, such as 2, 3, or 4 switches needing to be held down at the same time, multiple torches needing to be lit at the exact same time, or multiple targets needing to be shot at the same time. So if what he said is true and the sequel does have multiplayer, this doesn't mean it will ruin or affect the game in any way. Whether we have a friend running around Hyrule beside us that we can trade weapons with and purchase items from, or something less, like putting an item you want to sell or trade in a chest in Link's house, and then a specific friend can choose to trade for it by opening a chest in their version of Link's house from their own save file. Another option would be to just use Beetle. If you could speak to Beetle and let him know of specific items you need for upgrades, completing a quest, or is just hard for you to find. Then, when one of your friends speaks to Beetle in their game, Beetle will tell your friend about the items you want, and your friend can choose to trade or sell it. Once again, thank you to our new Patreon supporter, Lorenzo. If you've watched through all of this video and haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you need motivation, I don't know how reliable it is, but I heard from Daniel that those who do subscribe to us end up becoming billionaires overnight. But on a more serious note, we will be having new merch on our Teespring website, where all of our other shirts, jackets, posters, and everything is available to purchase. If you all would like to hear from Kayla, Daniel, or the Geek Apprentice on our podcast, the Hylian Gamescast, instead of just being left with my dumb thoughts, let us know and we will put it on the list. And on the episode, we will even read out some of your thoughts that you leave in the comments below. And of course, I want to give a huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who give us video ideas like this, some of our Zelda theory, top 10 list, and discussion topics that we discuss on our podcast or other videos. If you would like a shout out at the end of all of our videos or the beginning of our podcast, the Hylian Gamescast, as well as any of the other benefits mentioned. So thank you, Jon Snow, ZAIN, FRAN, WIGGLYWIGGLE, NORNARB or Brandon, SOBERX, Mr. MONOCLED, METROID, Jen, SuperNX64, David, Zoe, Natsu, Jesse, Andremoy, Ashton, Justin, Candy, Chad, BKRS7, Larulian Sheep, Blargnar, Monica, Shadow to Us, Rusty, Lovable Christy, Henry, and of course, Gus. Thank you all so much.